you, and I think of you every single day, believe it or not, because I have two daughters in your same age. And those girls have the same fears and the same hopes that you do. And that's why I do the work that I do. I don't do it for the elders. We're out of here. We're out of here. It's for you. Now, when I think of you as Generation C. And I know everybody sounds in Generation this, but I know I think of you as Generation C. Because for me, you are Generation Climate. You are the generation that is going to feel the most impacts from climate, but you're also the generation that potentially, if we all do our work right, will benefit the most from the transformations that we have to have in this society to address climate change. So you stand in that very, very interesting confluence of suffering from the impacts because you will, because the atmosphere is already loaded against your generation. And what we're doing now is to avoid the worst of those impacts. And if we do our work right, then you will benefit from that transformation in the energy sector that is very, very similar to the benefits that you've had from the revolution in the telecommunication industry, okay? None of you will remember the first cell phone that was put out 30 years ago that weighed 3 pounds, was called a brick. It was literally a brick. It took 10 hours to load it. It could work for 30 minutes, and then you have to load it again for 10 hours. And you could only transmit voice. Now all the cell phones that you have do everything except cook your dinner, right? Well, that is the kind of transformation that we've had in the telecommunication sector that we have to have in the energy sector. There is nothing, the energy sector, you have to think about this, the energy sector, except for a few little things, and I don't want to undermine what has happened in renewable energy, but honestly, compared to what we have to do, the energy sector has had absolutely no transformation in the past 30 years, and it has to absolutely be transformed. So you stand to benefit from all of that. Now, what is the path for you to be able to benefit that? Let me put out 3 different aspects of the work that you can do. And these 3, they're not necessarily sequential, but they could be in your experience. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but they could be, because some of you may choose to work in one or the other, or you may choose to work in all 3. But there are 3, for me, there are 3 aspects of the work that, that you can do. The first is the work that you're doing now, and I call that the work of voice. And that has everything to do with getting your voice heard, building the movement that I am eternally grateful for 350.org, to Greenpeace, to all of the other organizations that they're giving you the tools to build a climate movement. I still do not understand why we do not have people in the streets every single day in every single capital. So I won't speak to that because all of you know already much more than that, but much more than I do about building a movement. But I am very grateful that you are dedicating your time, your heart, and your brains to building this movement, which has to be built very, very urgently. Because the more we delay, the more impacts you're going to have. So, voice. Second aspect of the work that you all need to do, choice. What do I mean by choice? By choice, I mean exercise the power that you have as educated consumers. Don't put up with the crap of high carbon products. Absolutely demand that every single product that we buy be labeled for what the carbon intensity is. When we buy food, we know what either nutrition or crap is in the food, don't we? Well, why don't we know how much carbon has gone into everything that we buy? We have got to insist on labeling. We have got to insist on transparency on the carbon intensity of production. And we as consumers, you as the generation that is coming up and having the purchasing power that you do, you are the ones that have to exercise that. You need to insist that every single thing that you buy is labeled with respect to its carbon footprint. It's starting. There are a few things that are labeled, but why do we not have that transparency? And why do we just buy indiscriminately? We can't afford to buy indiscriminately anymore. We all will have to consume. Please let go, of this myth that somehow we're not going to consume anymore. We will have to consume, but let us consume intentionally, let us consume consciously. So choice, the power of choice. You are the generation that has the most purchasing power into the future. Please force production to be transparent about its carbon footprint. Choice. Point number 1, voice. Point number 2, choice. Point number 3, poise. For lack of a better word that rhymes with voice, choice, poise. And what do I mean by poise? I mean probably the most difficult part of the work that we need to do. And that is to really understand what is behind a very, very powerful triangle that is policy, technology, and finance. Because it is the interaction of policy, technology, and finance that is actually going to be at the bottom of the transformation that we all seek. So, if you really want to make a difference there, you need to understand what are the policies that are going to bring about the transformation, and what are the difficulties and the barriers to those policies, because all of them have barriers. You need to understand which the technologies are that can take us forward, and what are the difficulties of those technologies. You need to understand which are the financial instruments that are most powerful for each of these policies and technologies, and what the barriers are to that. And then, once you have those 3 very clear, then you need to understand in this transformation that we all need to have, who are the winners and who are the losers. Because there will be losers. And the losers are the ones who are going to put up the most resistance. Understood. That is a reality of life. But you need to understand where the resistance and where the handbrakes are going to come from, so that you're prepared for them. And so that you can then move in, get ready to be the leaders of the decisions. With poise. And why with poise? Because you will have a heck of a lot of resistance, a heck of a lot of pressure on you. And once you understand finance, technology, policy, and who the winners and the losers are, then you know what? Then you need to take all of that understanding and throw it in the garbage. But once you understand it, you need to throw it in the garbage, because it cannot stop you. You need to understand that the history that we have all built together is very, very valuable. It's very valuable as a lesson, but it does not determine the future. You can learn from it, but you determine the future. You need to decide what is possible, not based only on what has been possible in the past. You need to decide what is going to be possible for you, because that's very different than what was possible for me. But you can't do it out of ignorance. You need to understand the policy, the technology, the finance, and the politics. And once you do that, you will have the tools to move into the positions of taking the decisions that you want to take, and that you can take, and that you must take. So don't shy away from that. Get ready to act
with poise and determination. Because the generations after you are depending on you. And finally, I tell you what keeps me up at night. It's not even you. I actually see the eyes of 7 generations of children down the line. 7 generations. Those are the 7 generations that are going to be affected by climate. And I see those eyes of those children. And they ask me, and they ask you, what did you do? And if you're not able to stand and say from the bottom of our hearts, I did everything that I could. Everything that I could. Then we have no moral integrity. And I know that you're here because you are motivated by your